A girl alone in a remote forest cabin. A masked figure appears in the woods, silent, watching. Drawings begin to change on their own. At night, footsteps echo above the ceiling. Something is crawling in the attic. Doors open without sound. A footprint by the fireplace. She locks herself in, but the knob still turns. The masked man enters, closing in. No escape. Then, red eyes glow behind him. A cloaked warrior appears. The masked intruder vanishes. She wakes up outside, her sketchbook marked by something not human. What started as peaceful isolation becomes a terrifying spiral into the unknown. This story is not just seen, it follows you. I've always been the quiet one in the group, the one who listens more than she speaks, the one people forget in photos. Maybe that's why I love staying at my aunt's cottage in upstate Maine. It's this old place by the woods, no internet, no signal, just silence and the smell of pine. I came alone this time, needed to finish some sketches for a project and breathe. It was the third night when I saw the man standing at the edge of the forest, not moving, just there. His mask was white like ceramic, with small dark dots scattered along the sides and long carved slits where the mouth should be. I thought maybe he was a hunter, but he wasn't holding anything, and he didn't move. I closed the curtain and told myself I was imagining it. The next morning, nothing felt wrong. I drank tea by the window, trying to shake off the image. Around noon, I met a local girl named Ava at the small store nearby. She said she lived just past the ridge. We chatted briefly, and when I mentioned the man in the woods, her smile dropped for a second. Then she laughed, awkward and quick, and said, I must have been tired. That night, the house felt colder. I was drawing by the window when something tapped the glass. Just once. I turned, expecting wind or a branch. Nothing. I turned back to my sketch pad and saw it. My drawing had changed. The lines I had drawn of a woman sitting calmly had shifted. Now her head was tilted backward, mouth open too wide, eyes blackened. I didn't draw that. I closed the book and locked every door, double-checked every window. Around midnight, I heard the floor creak in the attic. I don't go up there, no one does. I froze, listening. A slow dragging noise moved above me, pacing like someone was crawling with something heavy behind them. My chest was tight, but I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Eventually, it stopped. The next morning, I found dirt under the living room window and a single wet footprint by the fireplace. I ran outside. No prints, no trail, just pine needles and quiet. Ava came by later. She looked pale. She asked if I heard anything strange. I nodded, unsure if I should tell her everything. Her eyes watered. She said her brother disappeared last fall near this house. She left quickly after that. I didn't sleep that night. I locked myself in the bedroom, but I heard him come in. No breaking glass, no door. Just footsteps, slow and deliberate. I whispered to myself, hoping it would go away. Then I saw the knob turn. The door opened. Nothing was there, just the sound of breathing. Close, heavy. When I turned, he was in the corner. The same mask, taller than I remembered. His hand moved toward me, not fast, just inevitable. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. And then in the doorway behind him, someone stood, cloaked in black, face hidden, but with glowing red eyes like tears. With a sudden motion, the masked man vanished. I woke up outside, in the cold dirt, my sketchbook lying open beside me, pages torn. On the last page, a single sentence had been scratched in with something sharp. You weren't supposed to see him. I've never liked elevators. Not because I'm claustrophobic, but because of the silence. The way the air feels heavier in small spaces. This happened when I was interning at a hotel in Chicago last winter. The building was old but charming, with antique mirrors in every hallway and gold-framed portraits that always seemed a little tilted. I stayed on the 12th floor in a corner room with a narrow view of the lake. It was cozy enough, quiet at night, perfect for a short-term stay. On my third night, the elevator stopped between the 10th and 11th floors. No reason, no power outage. I pressed the buttons, nothing. I called the front desk, no signal. The lights flickered and went dark for about 5 seconds. When they came back on, the mirror inside the elevator had a crack down the middle. That crack hadn't been there before. A low, almost wet breathing filled the space. I backed into the corner and waited. After what felt like 10 minutes, the elevator started moving again. But it didn't take me to my floor. It went down. It stopped at the basement. I didn't even know the building had one. The doors opened to darkness. Cold air hit my face like I had stepped outside. I didn't leave the elevator. I just stood there, heart pounding, until the doors slowly shut again. When I reached the lobby, I told the night clerk, whose name was Julian, about it. He looked at me for a second too long, then quietly asked if I'd like to change rooms. I said no. That was my mistake. The next day, I met another guest named Elise in the elevator. She was probably in her late 20s, wore large round glasses, soft curls falling around her cheeks. She said she was visiting her uncle but didn't sound convinced. Something about her felt distant, like she was always distracted by something behind you. That night, I heard tapping sounds behind my headboard, soft and slow. I thought maybe it was pipes or heating, but they followed a pattern. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, again. In the morning, I found a photograph slipped under my door. It was black and white, printed on thick paper. In the photo, a girl stood in the same elevator I had used the day before. Her hands covered her face, but the crack on the mirror behind her was identical to the one I saw. There was something else too. In the reflection, a figure stood beside her, tall, thin, wearing a mask that looked almost metallic, shaped like a distorted oval with dark, empty eyes. I threw it away. I couldn't concentrate at work. I kept thinking about the elevator, the photo, the sound behind the wall. I told Julian again. He leaned in and whispered that I shouldn't use the elevator after midnight. I asked why. He said sometimes people go down and don't come back up, that it wasn't always a mechanical issue. I laughed, mostly out of discomfort, but deep down, I knew he wasn't joking. That night, Elise knocked on my door. She looked pale. She said she'd been hearing someone calling her name from the vent above her bed. A man's voice, soft but wrong somehow. We sat together in my room for a while. Then the fire alarm in the hallway went off for about 3 seconds and stopped. When we opened the door, no one else had come out. The hallway lights flickered. Elise said she wanted to leave. I walked her to the stairwell. We didn't say much. At 2:12 a.m., I woke up. My room was dark, too dark. Even the clock display was off. I reached for my phone. The screen didn't turn on. I stepped toward the window. Outside, the city lights were gone. Not dimmed, gone. Everything was black. I turned and saw the mirror across the room. My reflection was moving slightly behind me. I froze. It tilted its head. I didn't. Suddenly, the lights came back. I was standing alone. The mirror was normal. I packed my things in under 5 minutes. As I rushed toward the elevator, Julian stopped me. His eyes were wide, but his voice was calm. He told me not to go down. I asked what he meant. He said the figure in the mirror chooses people who don't belong. Then he handed me a note with 2 words. Use stairs. I left through the emergency exit. Elise never checked out. Her room was cleared the next day. No luggage, no sign-in record. I asked the manager. He said no one named Elise had stayed there. I looked for the photo I threw away, but it wasn't in the trash. It wasn't anywhere. I tried to forget, but I dream of the elevator often, of the cold, of the breathing, of the mask. And sometimes when I pass by mirrors, my reflection doesn't move quite right. I spent most of my childhood summers at my grandfather's house in Crescent Hills, a quiet town surrounded by forest. It wasn't much, just a small house near the edge of the woods, old floorboards, slow ceiling fans, and an antique piano no one played anymore. He passed away 2 years ago, and I hadn't returned since, until last week when I received a letter. It wasn't from a lawyer or the town. It was handwritten and unsigned, just a single sentence. Come home before the 7th night. I wasn't planning to go back, but something about the handwriting looked familiar, and I couldn't ignore it. My brother Caleb offered to drive up with me, and his friend Naomi joined. The drive was long and quiet most of the way. We arrived just before sunset. The house looked exactly the same, except for one thing. The attic window was open. It had been nailed shut for decades. We didn't think much of it at first. We unpacked, made coffee, and sat by the old fireplace like we used to. That night, the lights flickered 3 times before going out. We checked the fuse box. Nothing wrong. When the lights returned, the piano in the corner had 1 key pressed down. Caleb laughed and blamed it on vibrations from the storm outside. But it wasn't storming. The air was completely still. We went to bed early, more tired than scared. Around 3 a.m., I heard soft footsteps above me, slow and deliberate, the attic, but no one else heard it. The next morning, I told Caleb and Naomi. Caleb brushed it off. Naomi didn't say much, but I caught her staring at the piano more than once. Later, we found a box in the back room labeled "For Her." It was locked, and none of us could open it. We left it on the table and went into town. An old woman at the local market stared at me. She asked if I was his granddaughter. I nodded. She whispered something strange. He shouldn't have kept the box. That night, Naomi woke me up. She said she saw someone in the mirror. She was shaking. We searched the room. No one. But when I passed the hallway mirror, I noticed something behind us. Not a reflection. A figure. Tall, wearing dark robes. Its face hidden in shadows, like light refused to touch it. I turned. Nothing there. The piano played again. Just one note. We stayed in the living room together until dawn. The following day, the box was open. None of us touched it. Inside were folded papers, photos, and an old locket. The photos were of me as a child, photos I had never seen before. In each one I was playing alone in the yard, but there was always something in the background. A shape, always the same distance, always watching. I felt sick. Caleb said maybe it was dust on the lens. Naomi didn't speak. That night I dreamed of the attic. I was standing there, alone, looking down through the floor. I saw myself sleeping. Then I saw something crawl down the ceiling toward me. I woke up drenched in cold sweat. My blanket was gone. I found it twisted on the piano bench. None of us slept after that. We packed and prepared to leave. But when we opened the door, there was fog. Not just outside, it was inside too. Crawling along the walls. The hallway grew longer, like the house had stretched. Caleb tried to call someone, no signal. Naomi stood frozen. Then the piano played again. A melody this time, sad and slow. It wasn't random. It was the same lullaby my grandfather used to hum when I was sick. I walked toward it. The air got colder. The figure from the mirror stood in the corner, facing the wall. It didn't move, but I heard something from behind it. A whisper. It said my name. Caleb pulled me back. The figure turned. It had no face, just smooth, empty skin. But I felt it watching. Naomi fainted. The lights exploded. Everything went black. I don't remember much after that. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting alone on the front porch. Caleb and Naomi were still asleep inside. The fog had lifted. The door was wide open. The piano was silent. The box was gone. We left that morning. None of us spoke during the drive. 2 days later, Naomi left town without saying goodbye. Caleb won't return my calls. And last night, I found the same box outside my apartment door. No note this time, just the locket. And when I opened it, there was a photo inside. It was me, taken yesterday, sitting at my desk. I live on the 9th floor. No one can see into my apartment. 3 weeks ago, I moved into a small rental apartment above a used bookstore. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The kind of place where the floor creaked when you turned too fast and the window latches stuck no matter how hard you pulled. I liked the quiet. The only sound was the occasional thud of bookshelves below and the radio humming from the owner's room behind the counter. His name was Alden. Mid-40s, soft-spoken, always smelled like old paper and coffee. The bookstore had a back room marked staff only, but I saw someone go in there on my first day. A tall man, pale as candle wax, wearing a charcoal coat and wide-brimmed hat. Alden didn't introduce him. I asked about it once. Alden said there was no one else working there. I thought maybe it was a customer. But the way the man walked, with slow, balanced steps like he wasn't touching the floor, stuck with me. At night, I began hearing a low hum through the wall. It wasn't the radio. It was deeper, closer, like someone humming a lullaby behind a locked door. I tried recording it, but playback was always silent. My friend Tessa visited that weekend. She noticed the same thing. The air in the living room felt cold, like you were being watched from above. She joked about haunted places, but her laugh faded quickly. Something about the air made your lungs tighten. On the 4th night, I woke to a knock on the door. 3 soft taps. I checked the clock, 2:41 a.m. No one should be here. I looked through the peephole. No one. But when I stepped back, I heard a whisper from the other side. Not a voice, just a breath too close to the wood. I didn't open it. In the morning, Alden asked if I heard anything strange. I hesitated. He smiled without showing his teeth and said, "Some buildings remember things longer than we do." Later that week, I visited the attic storage space above the stairs. I'd avoided it since moving in. The landlord said it hadn't been used in years. I found old shelves covered in dust and boxes filled with handwritten journals. Most were illegible, but one stood out. The cover read, Alaya. The pages were filled with drawings of a girl. Long black hair, round glasses, always hiding behind bookshelves. It looked like me. That night, I dreamt of her. She was sitting cross-legged on the bookstore floor, staring at the door to the back room. She turned and said nothing, but I felt she knew me. When I woke up, my room smelled like the bookstore downstairs. Old paper and something else, like rain on cold stone. I found the journal open on my desk, though I'd left it locked in a drawer. I confronted Alden the next morning. He denied everything. But as I turned to leave, he said quietly, "If you hear your name tonight, don't answer." His voice sounded different, like someone else was using it. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard someone whispering my name from the ceiling. Slow, careful, almost like tasting the syllables. I stayed still, then the light in the hallway flickered. The humming started again, only this time it was coming from inside my mirror. The reflection behind me was not mine. It was Alaya. Her eyes were wide, glassy, her lips parted like she was trying to speak. I covered the mirror and turned off every light. A second later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not heavy, floating, rhythmic. I opened my window and looked down. The man with the hat was standing in the alley, looking up. His face was featureless, just smooth skin and two faint red glows where his eyes should be. I stayed at Tessa's for a few nights. She believed me, said her grandmother used to talk about places where stories echo through people. I didn't understand, but I felt it. I returned one last time to pack my things. As I walked into the apartment, the humming stopped. Everything was still. The mirror had cracked. The journal was gone. But the drawing remained, etched faintly into the dust of my window. A girl in glasses, standing at the back room door. I left before sunset. Alden wasn't at the counter. The bookstore was empty, lights off. A sign hung on the door that read "Closed and further notice." I never saw him again. But now every few weeks I receive packages in the mail. No return address. Inside are pages torn from that journal, each one showing her closer. And last night, there was a drawing of me sleeping. The window beside my bed was open. I never open it. I spent last summer volunteering at a historical archive in Ashfield, a quiet town tucked between the mountains. The building used to be a courthouse in the 1800s, now converted into a preservation center. The air inside always smelled like parchment and lemon polish. I worked mostly with old census logs and handwritten letters, alone in a narrow room on the second floor. There was no AC, just a ceiling fan that barely moved. I liked the stillness. It gave me space to think. One afternoon, as I was scanning documents into the digital system, I came across a folded note tucked behind a ledger. The handwriting was jagged, uneven. It simply read, "Do not catalog room 9. I had never seen a room 9. The floor plan posted by the door showed only 8. When I asked the supervisor, Daryl, about it, he paused before saying, "Some rooms were sealed off after renovations." I didn't press further. That evening, after the others left, I stayed late to finish work. The lights in the hallway were on timers, and one by one they flicked off behind me. As I reached for my bag, I heard footsteps above me, slow, spaced like someone pacing across the attic. But there wasn't an attic. The roof was flat. I looked up, confused, then shook it off and left. Outside, I saw a woman standing across the street, looking at the archive. Her hair was long and dark, and she was wearing a faded yellow dress. Her expression was unreadable. The next day, I mentioned her to Daryl. He looked uncomfortable and suggested I take the rest of the afternoon off. I didn't. Instead, I searched the building for room 9. I knocked on walls, checked the basement, even counted the windows from the outside. Eventually, behind a shelf in the eastern hallway, I found something odd. The wall had a faint seam, like an old doorway that had been plastered over. It felt slightly warmer there, like the air was breathing. That night, I dreamed of the woman in the yellow dress. She was standing in front of the sealed doorway, staring at me. Her eyes were completely white, not glowing, just blank. She didn't speak, but I woke up with her name in my head. Haley. I don't know how I knew it. When I returned to the archive, Daryl wasn't there. Instead, another staff member named Lucas was watching the front. He said Daryl had called out sick. Lucas was quiet but kind. He helped me carry boxes and didn't ask too many questions. Later, while organizing files in the reading room, I saw Haley again. This time she was standing inside, between two shelves. The light above her flickered. I turned toward her and she vanished. I checked the space, nothing. But a file folder had fallen to the floor, papers scattered. Among them was a black and white photograph labeled 1906. It showed the original courthouse staff. At the far edge of the photo was a woman in a yellow dress, Haley. I took the photo to Lucas. He went pale. He told me not to show it to anyone. He said the last time someone brought up room 9, things got strange. Lights turning on by themselves, visitors hearing their names whispered. And then he said the room had been sealed after someone went missing. A girl who had claimed to hear music behind the wall. I remembered the footsteps, the heat, the dream. I left early that day. That night, I received an email from an anonymous sender. No message, just an attachment. It was a scanned blueprint of the archive from 1899. There was a room 9. It was a records room, later repurposed and removed from maps after a fire. The fire had no official cause. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft humming outside my window. I live on the 3rd floor. I looked through the blinds. No one. When I returned to the archive, room 9 was no longer behind the shelf. The seam was gone, just flat wall. I told Lucas. He looked me in the eye and said, "You were never supposed to find it." He handed me a file folder. Inside were copies of notes written by past volunteers, each one mentioning the same things. Humming, heat, Haley. One note said, "She only finds the ones who remember her." That was the last day I worked there. I moved out of town a week later, but the humming followed me. Not always, just sometimes, in hotel rooms or elevators or old buildings. And once, on the back of a receipt from a coffee shop I'd never been to, someone had written room 9 is still open. Underneath that, a single fingerprint in yellow dust. I haven't been able to scrub it off. I spent a weekend with my cousin Layla in a rental cabin near Hollow Lake, a quiet place surrounded by pine and fog. The lake was still, almost too still, and the trees barely moved even when the wind came. We both needed a break from the city. I brought books, she brought snacks. We laughed a lot that first night, playing old songs and making pancakes past midnight. The place felt peaceful, maybe too peaceful. On the second morning, Layla said she had a dream about a man standing in the woods. He had no face, just long limbs and a coat that brushed the ground. She laughed it off, but her eyes didn't. I told her it was probably stress. Still, I stayed close to the windows the rest of the day. There was something odd about the woods. No birds, no rustling, just silence, as if the trees were listening. That night, we heard tapping sounds from the back of the cabin. 3 taps, then nothing. I checked, saw no one. A few minutes later, Layla found our wet towels folded on the front porch. We hadn't touched them. The next morning, the cabin smelled like burnt wood, but there was no fire. Just the scent, thick and dry, floating through every room. I decided to take a walk toward the lake to clear my head. As I passed a large tree stump, I saw something carved into it. A circle with 7 lines inside, all pointing in different directions. The lines looked fresh, like someone had made them recently. I took a picture. When I looked at it later, the symbol wasn't there. That evening, Layla was quiet. She kept glancing toward the hallway. I asked what was wrong, and she said she kept hearing her name whispered behind the wall. I listened. Nothing. She looked at me and said it felt like something was waiting. I didn't know what to say. We stayed in the living room, lights on, music low. Around midnight, the power cut out. We lit candles and sat in silence. The air felt heavy, like we were underwater. I heard a soft knock on the window behind me. Layla grabbed my hand. I turned around slowly. No one, but the condensation on the glass had a handprint, small, 5 fingers, long and thin, pressed right in the center. We didn't sleep, just waited for morning. At dawn, we packed. Layla didn't speak, just moved with purpose. I went to grab my phone charger and noticed something new on the hallway wall, a picture I'd never seen. An old black and white photo in a wooden frame. It showed the cabin, maybe 50 years ago. 2 people stood in front, a man and a girl. The man was tall, face blurred. The girl looked just like Layla. I called her over. She stared at it, then walked away. She said she was ready to leave. I locked the door behind us and didn't look back. On the drive home, I asked if she remembered her grandparents ever owning land out there. She didn't answer. Her phone rang twice, both times with no caller ID. When she finally answered the 3rd call, she didn't speak, just listened. Then she turned it off and stared out the window the rest of the ride. We promised not to talk about it. For weeks, I tried to forget. But 2 nights ago, I got a postcard, no return address. On the front, a photograph of the same cabin. On the back, in the same jagged handwriting I saw on the tree, 7 nights is enough. I haven't heard from Layla since. Her number rings, but no one picks up. I thought maybe she needed space. But last night, I had a dream. I was standing by the lake. The water was perfectly still. I saw her reflection beside me, even though she wasn't there. And behind us, in the water, something was watching. Not a person, just an outline. Long arms, coat drifting in the water. No face, still. This morning, my porch had folded towels on it. Wet, fresh. I haven't been near water in weeks. I think maybe I brought something back. Or maybe I left something behind. Either way, I can't look at reflections anymore. Sometimes they wait longer than you think.